Why do husbands start to dislike their wives as they get older? Advice from old people. Marriage is a journey, one that spans decades, evolving through different stages of life. In the early years, love feels effortless, fueled by passion and excitement. But as the years go by, many couples find themselves struggling with a silent shift in their relationship. Some husbands, once affectionate and devoted, begin to grow distant, indifferent, or even resentful toward their wives. For older couples, this change can feel unsettling, leaving many wives wondering, why does my husband seem to dislike me now? As people who have lived long enough to witness and experience these struggles firsthand, we, elders who have weathered the storms of marriage, offer our wisdom. The reasons for this emotional shift are complex, but they are not irreversible. Understanding them can be the first step in rekindling a marriage that has lost its warmth. Let's explore the deeper reasons behind this phenomenon and, more importantly, what can be done to restore love, respect, and connection. 1. The silent drift, emotional disconnection over time. One of the most painful yet common experiences in long-term marriage is the slow, almost imperceptible drift between two people who once shared everything. This disconnection does not happen overnight. It happens in the small, quiet ways. When conversations become transactional rather than meaningful. When laughter fades into silence. When gestures of affection are replaced by routine. What was once a partnership filled with understanding and shared dreams begins to feel like two people simply coexisting. For many husbands, this emotional disconnection is difficult to articulate. They may not even recognize it as a growing distance. They simply feel an underlying dissatisfaction, an absence of warmth they once took for granted. Instead of seeking to bridge the gap, they retreat inward. They stop sharing their thoughts because they assume their wives are no longer interested. They stop asking about their wives' feelings because they believe they already know the answer, or worse, that it no longer matters. Over time, silence becomes easier than vulnerability, and indifference replaces intimacy. This gradual drifting apart is often mistaken for inevitability, a natural consequence of years spent together. But in truth, it is not time that erodes connection. It is neglect. The moment a couple stops prioritizing each other emotionally, even in the smallest ways, they begin to lose what once made their relationship special. A husband who once cherished his wife's thoughts may now barely acknowledge them. A wife who once found joy in her husband's company may now feel like she is talking to a stranger. The good news is that emotional disconnection, while deeply painful, is not irreversible. The most important step is recognition, the willingness to see what has been lost and make an effort to reclaim it. Connection is built in everyday moments, asking questions not out of obligation but curiosity, listening not just to reply but to understand, showing affection not just through words but through presence. Even after decades together, a marriage can be revitalized, but it requires both partners to turn toward each other instead of away, to remember why they chose each other in the first place, and to choose each other still. 2. The loss of admiration and mutual respect. In the early years of marriage, admiration flows effortlessly. A husband looks at his wife and sees a woman full of life, intelligence, and warmth. A wife looks at her husband and sees a man of strength, ambition, and purpose. There is a quiet pride in simply being each other's partner, a deep respect for the roles they play in one another's lives. But as time passes, that admiration, if not carefully nurtured, begins to fade. Not because either person is any less worthy, but because familiarity breeds complacency. A husband who once saw his wife as his closest confidant may now see her only as the person who reminds him to take his medication or nags him about his diet. A wife who once admired her husband's work ethic and wisdom may now see only a man who sits in his chair, grumbles about the news, and seems uninterested in anything beyond routine. The qualities that once felt extraordinary now seem ordinary. The problem is not that these qualities have disappeared, it's that they have gone unrecognized for too long. The loss of admiration often leads to a subtle erosion of respect. A husband who feels unappreciated may withdraw, speaking with less kindness, offering less patience. A wife who feels overlooked may grow resentful, replacing affection with frustration. This slow unraveling is rarely dramatic. It happens in the sighs of disappointment, the eye rolls, the dismissive gestures. Over time, love is not lost in one catastrophic moment, but in a series of small, quiet betrayals, the failure to notice, to acknowledge, to cherish. But admiration is not something that disappears permanently. It is something that must be actively rekindled. It begins with seeing one another again, not just as a spouse, but as a whole person. It is in the effort to look beyond the years, beyond the gray hair and deepened lines, and remember the qualities that made them fall in love. A simple thank you, an expression of pride, a recognition of effort. These small acts have the power to restore the respect and admiration that time has dulled. Love does not thrive on grand gestures alone. It is sustained in the everyday act of valuing the person beside you. 3. The shift from lovers to roommates. Marriage begins with an unshakable sense of togetherness. In the early years, every conversation holds excitement, every touch feels electric, and every shared moment deepens the connection. But as time passes, a quiet transformation takes place, one that often goes unnoticed until the distance feels too vast to ignore. What once felt like a deep and passionate partnership can slowly turn into an arrangement of convenience. Two people who were once lovers become more like roommates, bound by history rather than intimacy. This shift does not happen all at once. It begins in small, seemingly insignificant ways. The quiet dinners where words are few, the evenings spent in separate rooms, the automatic good nights spoken without meaning. Responsibilities replace spontaneity. Conversations revolve around errands, bills, and health concerns rather than dreams, feelings, or shared joy. The relationship becomes predictable, comfortable in some ways, but lacking the warmth that once made it feel alive. The love remains, but it no longer feels vibrant. It is simply there, buried beneath the weight of routine. For many husbands, this loss of excitement can be unsettling. They may long for the days when their wives looked at them with admiration, when affection came easily, when laughter was abundant. But instead of expressing this longing, they pull away. They distract themselves with television, hobbies, or silence, believing that this is simply how marriage unfolds over time. Wives, too, feel this absence, wondering when the intimacy they once knew was replaced by an unspoken distance. But love does not vanish simply because years have passed. It fades when it is no longer nurtured. A marriage does not lose its passion because two people have grown older. It loses it when they stop choosing each other in small, everyday ways. Reclaiming that connection does not require grand gestures. It requires effort, a touch on the arm, a shared memory spoken aloud, a question asked with genuine curiosity. The smallest acts of attention can reignite what routine has dulled. Passion is not something that naturally sustains itself. It is something that must be kept alive by two people who refuse to let it slip away. 4. Aging and the struggle with self-identity. Aging is a journey that brings wisdom, but it also brings change, sometimes in ways that shake a person's very sense of self. For many men, growing older is not just about the physical signs of aging. It is about confronting the reality of time. The roles they once took pride in, the provider, the protector, the strong and capable man, begin to shift. Careers come to an end, physical strength diminishes, and the world that once seemed full of purpose can suddenly feel smaller. This quiet struggle with identity often goes unspoken. A husband may not have the words to express the fear of becoming irrelevant or the frustration of no longer feeling needed in the way he once was. Instead, these emotions manifest in withdrawal, impatience, or even resentment toward the one person who has been by his side the longest, his wife. She becomes a reflection of the years that have passed, a reminder of the youth that is now a distant memory. Without realizing it, he may start to view her through the lens of his own insecurities, associating her with the parts of life that feel lost rather than the parts that remain. At the same time, a wife faces her own changes. She too is adapting to the realities of aging, finding new meaning in a stage of life that is different from the one she once knew. But when her husband pulls away, burdened by his own internal battles, she may feel abandoned, as though the man she once leaned on is no longer emotionally present. What was once a partnership can begin to feel like two people living parallel lives, both struggling with the passage of time, but unable to talk about it. But aging does not have to be a loss. It can be a transformation. The key is to face these changes together rather than in isolation. A husband who feels like he is losing his sense of purpose must be reminded that his value is not in what he can do, but in who he is. A wife who feels the weight of distance must find ways to pull her husband back into connection, not with force, but with patience. Aging is inevitable, but growing apart is not. A marriage that embraces this new stage with openness and understanding can find a different kind of strength. One built not on the past, but on the love that still exists in the present. 5. Unresolved resentments that accumulate over decades. Marriage is built on countless shared experiences, but not all of them are joyful. Over the years, small wounds, an unkind word spoken in frustration, a moment of neglect, a promise unfulfilled, can accumulate like stones in a riverbed. At first, they may seem insignificant, easily stepped over, easily forgotten. But as the years pass, those small stones become a wall, a barrier that neither partner intended to build, but that stands between them nonetheless. For many husbands, resentment does not come from one defining event, but from the slow buildup of unmet expectations, unspoken disappointments, and lingering grievances that were never fully resolved. Perhaps he felt unappreciated for the sacrifices he made, working long hours, or making choices he believed were for the good of the family, but that were never acknowledged. Perhaps he felt unheard, his emotions dismissed in moments when he needed understanding. Over time, what started as frustration hardens into bitterness, and without realizing it, he begins to look at his wife not with affection, but with quiet resentment. Wives, too, carry their own burdens, a lifetime of compromises, moments of loneliness even within the marriage, years of putting others first. These experiences leave their marks. And when a husband withdraws emotionally or responds with coldness, it feels less like a moment of anger and more like confirmation of something she has feared for years, that the love they once shared has eroded beyond repair. But resentment is not an unmovable force. It is a weight that can be lifted if both partners are willing to acknowledge it. Healing does not come from rehashing every past argument or demanding apologies for every slight. It comes from the willingness to truly see each other again, to listen with the intent to understand rather than defend, to choose forgiveness not because the past does not matter, but because the future does. Resentment may have built a wall, But love, when given the space and effort it deserves, can tear it down. The question is not whether a marriage can survive resentment, but whether both partners are willing to let go of the past in order to embrace what still remains. 6. The burden of caregiving and unequal responsibilities. As couples grow older, the balance of responsibilities within a marriage often shifts in ways neither partner fully anticipated. What once felt like an equal partnership can slowly become an unspoken arrangement where one carries more weight than the other. For many wives, this means taking on the role of caregiver, not just in the practical sense, but in an emotional one as well. They become the ones who manage doctor's appointments, remind their husbands to take medication, handle household tasks, and provide comfort in times of illness. What was once a relationship built on mutual support can start to feel like an obligation, leaving wives emotionally and physically drained. For husbands, the experience of aging can bring feelings of helplessness and frustration. A man who once prided himself on his independence may struggle with the realization that he now relies on his wife for things he once did effortlessly. Instead of expressing gratitude, he may respond with irritability, masking his discomfort with anger or withdrawal. He may resist assistance, not because he does not need it, but because accepting it feels like admitting defeat. And without realizing it, he may begin to resent the very person who is standing by his side, seeing her care not as an act of love, but as a reminder of his own limitations. This unspoken tension can create a quiet divide between husband and wife. The wife feels unappreciated, exhausted from giving so much with little acknowledgement in return. The husband feels diminished, longing for the sense of control he once had over his life. Neither fully expresses these emotions, yet both feel the weight of them. But caregiving, when viewed through a lens of love rather than duty, does not have to create resentment. A husband who expresses gratitude, even in the smallest ways, a thank you, a soft touch, a moment of recognition, can transform how his wife feels in her role. A wife who acknowledges her husband's struggles with aging rather than just his needs can help him hold on to his dignity. When both partners see each other not as burdens but as companions on this journey, the act of caring becomes not a sacrifice but an expression of the love that has endured through the years. 7. The impact of changing intimacy needs. Intimacy in marriage is often thought of as something that belongs to youth, passionate, effortless, and natural. But in reality, true intimacy is not defined by age, it is defined by connection. As couples grow older, their needs for intimacy shift, sometimes in ways that neither partner fully understands. What was once an easy, instinctive part of the relationship can become a source of confusion, frustration, or even distance. For many husbands, aging brings physical changes that affect their confidence and their ability to express intimacy in the ways they once did. Health issues, fatigue, and hormonal shifts can make them feel as though they are no longer the man they used to be. Rather than confronting these feelings openly, some men withdraw, fearing rejection or believing that their wives no longer desire them. This withdrawal, however, is often misinterpreted. A wife may see it as disinterest or even as a sign that love itself has faded. Wives experience their own changes as well. Shifts in emotional needs, evolving expectations of closeness, and a desire for connection that extends beyond the physical. Many women crave deeper emotional intimacy as they age, longing for meaningful conversations, small gestures of affection, and the reassurance that they are still seen and valued. But when a husband pulls away, whether out of insecurity or resignation, she may feel abandoned in ways that go far beyond the bedroom. The loss of intimacy in a marriage is rarely about one partner wanting less and the other wanting more. It is about misunderstanding each other's evolving needs. True intimacy is not just physical. It is found in touch, in laughter, in the comfort of shared moments, a gentle hand on the shoulder, a compliment, a memory spoken aloud. These small acts of connection remind a couple that love is still alive. When both partners acknowledge that their needs have changed, but their desire to connect remains, they can redefine intimacy in a way that is meaningful for this stage of life. It is not about trying to recapture the past, but about embracing the present with openness, patience, and a willingness to meet each other where they are. Love does not fade with age. It simply asks to be nurtured in new ways. 8. External pressures and stressors. Weighing on the marriage. Marriage does not exist in isolation. It is constantly shaped by the outside world, by financial worries, family responsibilities, health struggles, and the uncertainties that come with aging. In the early years, couples often face these pressures together, standing side by side as they build a life. But as time passes, external stressors do not disappear, they only change. And for many older couples, these burdens begin to take a toll on their relationship in ways they never expected. For husbands, the weight of financial concerns can be particularly heavy. Even in retirement, worries about money, whether it is savings, medical expenses, or supporting adult children, can create an underlying sense of anxiety. A man who once felt secure in his role as a provider may now feel powerless against rising costs and unforeseen expenses. But instead of voicing these concerns, he may withdraw, becoming irritable or emotionally distant. The frustration he feels about his circumstances can quietly turn into frustration with his wife, not because she is at fault, but because she is there. She is the closest person to him, the one who sees his vulnerabilities, the one who shares his life. And sometimes that closeness makes it easier to displace the stress onto her. Wives, too, carry their own burdens, worries about their husband's health, concerns about their grown children, the emotional weight of feeling unseen or unheard. They may sense the tension in their marriage, but struggle to find the right words to address it. Over time, conversations become strained, filled with unspoken worries rather than open support. A couple that once faced the world as a team may now feel like they are standing on opposite sides, both struggling with their own stress, both feeling alone in their fears. But stress does not have to drive a wedge between two people. It can also be a force that pulls them closer if they allow it. The key is remembering that marriage is not about facing difficulties alone, but about facing them together. A simple acknowledgement, I know this is hard for you, or I appreciate everything you do, can bridge the emotional gap that stress creates. Problems will always exist, but when a couple chooses to meet them hand in hand, their love remains stronger than the challenges they face. 9. Lack of appreciation. One of the quietest yet most destructive forces in a long-term marriage is the slow disappearance of appreciation. In the early years, gratitude flows naturally. A husband notices the small things his wife does. A wife acknowledges the efforts her husband makes. But as time passes, familiarity replaces recognition. The things that were once admired become expected, and gestures of love that once felt special become part of the background. Without realizing it, appreciation fades, and in its place grows a quiet resentment, a feeling of being unseen and unvalued. For husbands, this lack of recognition can feel deeply personal. A man who spent decades working, providing, and making sacrifices for his family may begin to feel invisible. The world no longer sees him in the way it once did. His career has ended, his children have their own lives, and the things that once gave him a sense of purpose have shifted. If, in his own home, he also feels overlooked, it can create a profound sense of loneliness. He may not say it aloud, but he longs to hear that his presence still matters, that his contributions, past and present, are recognized. Without this reassurance, frustration and bitterness can take root, and rather than expressing his need for appreciation, he may withdraw or respond with shortness and impatience. Wives, too, experience this loss. Years of caring for a family, making a home, and supporting her husband can begin to feel thankless. What was once acknowledged with gratitude may now go unnoticed. She may wonder if her efforts have truly mattered, if anyone sees the love and labor she has poured into her marriage. And when her husband pulls away emotionally, it deepens the ache of feeling unappreciated, as though everything she has done has somehow become invisible. But appreciation is not something that disappears forever. It is something that can be restored with intention. A simple thank you, a word of recognition, an acknowledgement of effort. These small acts have the power to soften resentment and bring warmth back into a marriage. Love does not thrive in silence. It needs to be spoken, shown, and acknowledged. The most lasting relationships are not those without struggle, but those in which two people choose every day to see and appreciate each other anew. Final thoughts from those who have lived it. Marriage is not a story of perfection. It is a journey of endurance, change, and renewal. The love that once felt effortless does not vanish, but it does shift, and with it comes the challenge of adaptation. A marriage that lasts a lifetime is not one without struggles, but one where both partners continue to choose each other, even when the years make it harder to do so. As time passes, it is easy to mistake routine for distance and familiarity for indifference. It is easy to believe that the warmth that once defined a marriage has faded beyond repair. But love is not something that simply withers with age. It is something that requires tending, something that must be nurtured through kindness, patience, and the willingness to see each other anew. For those who have been married for decades, the question is not whether hardships will come, but how they will be faced. Will they be met with silence or with understanding, with resentment or with forgiveness? The strongest marriages are not those without wounds, but those where healing is chosen again and again. Even in the later years, love can be rediscovered. A simple touch, a word of gratitude, a shared moment of laughter. These are the things that remind two people why they began this journey together in the first place. It is never too late to soften, to reconnect, to let go of past grievances, and turn toward one another once more. In the end, the measure of a marriage is not found in the years that have passed, but in the love that still remains. And for those willing to reach for it, there is always more to be found. These lessons are meant to inspire you to live fully and authentically. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Take a moment to reflect and share one thing you've learned and plan to apply in your own life. Let's support each other on this journey toward embracing these truths. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment with 1. If not, feel free to comment with 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and here's to living life on your own terms.